Well, you know, like when you read artist interviews and say like if it's by a house artist, and then the natural thing is for them to say, "Oh, I'm influenced by, I don't know, Theo Parrish or Moody Man or whoever is, you know, someone that they kind of respect in that field." Whereas if a house artist said, you know, these are the things that influence me right now, it'd be listening to Mick Lynch talk, Street Fighter 2, the ending of WrestleMania 40, the last episode of EastEnders. People be like, what? But actually, why exclude that from your influences? Because those are things you're still taking in, right? And I think like directly going, hey, I'm referencing these things, as opposed to just going, well, I'm listening to this other song and then making a song out of this other song. Most people are not actually functioning that way. It feels like the right thing to say, but there's all these other inputs that are pretty unconscious that are kind of filtering into your ideas.
Mixcloud.
The Inside Track.
All right, we're live. Welcome to another episode of The Inside Track. I'm very excited to be joined by our guest today, Elijah. I think many of the listeners will probably have come across either your Yellow Squares project or your work as an incredible grime DJ. But you're kind of a multifaceted Renaissance man in some ways. So I wanted to ask, to start off with, how would you introduce yourself to maybe people who haven't yet come across you?
I'll just say now I'm writing and DJing probably like an equal measure. So I write about scenes, about things happening in London. Kind of relates to, I guess, the music that came out of like grime, kind of Black British culture broadly, and then stuff about systems and feedback loops, and yeah, there's some sort of overlap between Black British culture, technology, pro wrestling, and just other curiosities. But yes, the majority is music.
I want to jump straight into the pro wrestling piece because I know you sent me a link to one of the Yellow Squares, so it talked about that. But it was one that there wasn't too much context to it, and I was kind of like, what is this? What does this mysterious message mean? Like, what is the link, or what can artists learn from pro wrestlers?
Well, I think we're hitting a point now of this saturated artificial authenticity. So, you know, every social media manager effectively ends up telling their artists to behave in certain ways, to post at certain times, that this kind of content works. And we know that it just exists in the content sphere. And then when they step out into the real world, it's something very different. And those things don't normally align. And I think one thing that pro wrestling has always done is had this line between fantasy and reality, where, you know, what's happening on the show kind of spills into real life. Deliberately, not deliberately, you know, they kind of are in character more than they're not. And I find that super interesting. Whereas I think the pulling back of the curtain for artists, I'm not sure how much of this has been a benefit for all of us, really. And if we were gonna just pull it back a bit, if we we're gonna like claw some transparency back, what goes in replacement of that could be storytelling, it could be just straight fiction. I don't know. There's just ways to play around with this thing that I think would be a lot more interesting than, you know, here's what I've been up to, or my photo dump or something like
that. I interviewed Charlie Bones from Do You Radio a couple of weeks ago now. And we had a really interesting conversation about the nature of celebrity. And I guess if you're an artist or DJ or somebody who has some level of celebrity, then there's this very strange dynamic where people feel like they know you. And in a way, if you pull back the curtain too far, some of that mystery disappears. And, you know, some of our favorite artists from the past, you know, whether it be, you know, Prince or, you know, whoever it may be, like, you do wonder if they lived in the age of like social media, would they still hold the same mystery today as in the past?
Yeah, I mean, there are people today that do that now. Like Frank Ocean's one of those people that people bring up a lot. I'd say like Cass is Dead is one of those people. He's like always in character. You don't see him just with his mask eating an avocado on toast. Like, it would take away like from the whole presentation. And I feel like this filters down to even to emerging artists. That balance of your output is something that an auntie would post on Facebook versus like an artist using their thing as a canvas. And sometimes I see, especially with DJs, like the line between being a Facebook uncle and an artist is blurring, and it's becoming like less interesting to follow. Maybe it's me as well. I'm just like not interested in people's personal lives that much either. So there's something in that I'm sure I'm not the only one that is not interested in seeing a DJ's holiday pictures.
Yeah, it's interesting how in some ways some people could think of it as authentic and like this is a kind of inside view of some DJ's holiday life. But on the other hand, everybody could kind of post that in a way, and it's not unique or special or
it's not driving anything artistically, like and that's what I'm getting at here. So I guess what I've tried to do with my own project is, 99% of what you see from me is some sort of artistic kind of conversation or question or something related to the project. It's not really about me even, like there's some, obviously my personality is involved in it, but there's nothing really about me like personally in it. And I think that balance feels, at least for me, feels more interesting. And when I see artists cut the fluff out of their own presentation, it just makes them easier and more interesting to follow. I just get the music, maybe their point of view on certain things, but all of the slop in between, I would cut that out. And I see, like, again, me versus social media manager. I'm like, okay, the social media manager is telling you to do this for £1,200 a month. I'm telling you to do this for free. So pick a side, yeah.
And are you still a manager to Flavor D, Royalty,
No.
a few others?
No, so I ended my management commitments in the end of 2024, effectively, and but I was a manager for 12 years, and this is not all of my ideas are good or anything close to that, but I guess in working with people closely, you can see maybe what would fit more people than not fit more people. Like, I got one of the squares that's like, are the ideas still true at scale? So something that might work for Flavor D is not necessarily going to work for Royalty or vice versa. But what I am more certain of, especially as we have racked up more and more years on social media, on mobile internet, on this thing bleeding out into the club space, into live, into every decision that's being made creatively, it's like, well, is this making the music better? And for the most part, I'd probably say no.
Did you originally start as a DJ? Was that kind of the early days of pirate radio and stuff like that, and then you evolved into management and some of these other projects?
Yeah, so like most of the things are by necessity, not because I wanted to do them. So it's like writing and DJing was for enjoyment, like in grime in East London. So just when I started, it was kind of like the beginnings of the blogspot type period of time, and then that nearly like the end of pirate radio. So me and Skilliam were in this little zone of a generation where we were, I guess, internet savvy, but then also analog. Like, we were buying records, we were on rinse, and we were like sat between both sides. So we weren't like straight pirate radio, don't care about the internet kind of people. We were like, okay, we've got a blog, and we're gonna like connect with people on MSN and MySpace, and then build like that. That was kind of our routine, even though I was based in East London. So maybe like our approach was something that more someone further out would do because they had to. That was the only way of communicating. But we were actually in the scene or in the like physical spaces where the musical activity was happening, or where the musicians lived.
I mean, I know you're kind of moving on from managing now, but having had that experience of both sides of kind of being a DJ and then also manage other people, do you feel like there's one thing or maybe a couple things that you feel are really important for artists and DJs to know what it takes to be a good manager? Like, if somebody was, 18 right now, thinking about going into this as a career, what kind of piece of advice would you give them if they're thinking about trying to find a manager?
I think like not all managers are the same thing. So like this term of manager, you'd think, okay, it has the same job description for every artist, but every artist needs different things. Every artist has different strengths, like has different kind of creative desires, like commercial desires and so forth. So at the first 2 years, really, like Flavor D was the first artist I worked with on that level. It was just figuring out like how, like what you actually want, what do you want to do, and that's on both sides. It's like, okay, how do we work? How do we make this thing function? And as I spoke to more and more artists, like when they would fall out with like their manager, I'm like, well, if you wrote them a job description, what would that look like? And something as simple as that could solve so many problems. So the breakup between of what the work I did before was, I would handle more creative and strategy for the artists, and Will Skilliam would handle more like administrative and logistics. So we had this kind of divide between our work that was pretty clear. So there was things that were like, oh, that's a Will problem, or that's a Will question, and there were things that were more like an Elijah question. So I did a lot of social media stuff, like, and one of the projects that they worked on, TQD, like all the posts were me, you know what I mean? And like it was me playing around with people's perception of the thing, you know what I mean? So there was like these clear boundaries of like what, and expectations of what we wanted out of each other. And then as life changes, as you get older, as maybe some of those things get ticked off, you're in constant negotiation of what you spend your time doing, or more of the time doing than not. And the reason why I eventually was like, okay, this is like coming to the end for me, is because there's like a few things, like how many people have the same job for 12 years? Not many. I feel like the artists have like a lot more to do and to give and to like spread out into the world, but the corner of music and where they go next isn't necessarily personally where I'm interested in. Like I've been in the clubs for a long time. I want to try other things. So there's like partly like life pushing us different ways. And then I think there's this other thing of like, they know me inside out. I'm like the Elijah GPT to them. So there's certain things where this is not just them, but they will say, oh, I know what you're going to say, but what do you think of this? And then they'll be like, oh, okay, what do you think I'm going to say? And they'll be like, all right, cool, that's pretty much it. So there's not like much additional value you can maybe get out of me beyond that time. So they working with new people, working with new teams is like also necessary for their kind of growth into this different era of music and culture.
And so it'd be good to kind of talk about the Yellow Squares project. And in preparation for this chat, I listened to a few different podcasts and talks that you've done on your YouTube channel. And from what I understand, you kind of started it around the time of the kind of pandemics and lockdown, when it was kind of tough, very little social interaction, getting outside, IRL stuff. And it's kind of evolved in a way that feels very organic. Would you say that? Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. Like, obviously I didn't plan for what it developed into. It was just like kind of like something I was doing in my spare time between working with the artists and working on other projects in between. And it was like the output of the work I was doing or things I was curious about. There's a lot of like kind of thoughts that are like kind of ironclad, like the things that are just like, this is what dance music is, or this is what scenes are, this is what grime is, or this is how you build an audience. And I was like, oh, let me question that whole set of like just defaults for people. And in that, it was like challenging for me too, because without realizing some of the default beliefs that you hold post pandemic may not be true anymore. You know what I mean? And even a year into the pandemic, it was very different to the first few months of coming out. And then 2 years in, you can see, I guess, the lay of the land in a very different way. And then now, I guess, the time that's spent between working on the writing of the squares versus working with artists and other projects started to get to like maybe 50-50 or something. It was like, okay, well, how would I make this, a year project of just doing this by myself with no other income, no other projects going at the same time? Like, what would that even look like? And even in that, like, close that, make the thing is not telling someone else to do it, it's telling me to do it. And you're following my process of working that out too.
Yeah, I feel like the music culture space needs a philosopher like you to kind of ask these questions and to make people think about whether their default perceptions in the sort of status quo world are right anymore. Like the world has changed, and social media has changed things, and what it means to be a DJ has evolved and changed. And I think that what you've tapped into is this kind of like need for people across music culture to kind of re-examine their beliefs and what they're thinking, and what their view on certain things is. Just to kind of bring it up to date to today, so you've made over 1,000 squares, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it must be instead of like maybe thousands. I'm not too sure now. Yeah. But when you think of it, it's just notes. It's like maybe most of them have less than 10 words. So
and you've kind of selected some of them to put together into a book called Close the App, Make the Thing. I've ordered it. It's in the post. It should be arriving soon. But can you talk to us a little bit about that kind of process? Like, how did you choose what went into the book?
Yeah, so the book, is a collection of the kind of squares I've been posting on Instagram and Twitter. I wanted to, again, divide it in half. So half is like in theory, like all of the notes, and then half is in practice, or like a bit, I mean, it's a bit less than half, but is in practice. So the projects that came out of making the thing. So that's the lectures, the album, the book, like all these little things that have kind of come out of the ideas. But how I picked the actual squares that feature are more the things that I still think will be true like 5 years from now. That I can't really see any further than that. I can't see further than 2029 and what this space will be. So I was like, okay, if someone picked this up, I want someone to know it was written 2021 to 2024. I also want it still be functional 5 years from now. And it's not so dependent on like some bit of news or like a particular political issue that was happening at the time, or in response to something, or something that was coming from more emotive place. This was just more, these are the 60, 70 things that I think, questions you should ask yourself, and you should,
they're sort of timeless in a way.
Yeah, or just like keep on negotiating these things, like what scene is, what community is, what does art creating within your means mean to you, what does DJing mean, like all of these things, just constantly, like you could go back to that any time and it doesn't go out of date. Whereas if I put in the squares about like content creation, for example, if we don't have TikTok, then it's gonna mean something different. There's going to be like a different kind of rhythm to it. So yeah, I tried to pick the best of those in that sense. And then I guess some of the ones that I left out, some of them I just didn't like the design of them. Like I wrote them in a way that I didn't think they were rhythmically that good. So it was also about like capturing the best of the writing. So some of the kind of things that sit together that I'm really proud of, even if they're really simple.
One of the ones that really spoke to me a lot, and that I know is kind of maybe somewhat controversial for some people, but I think caused them to kind of re-examine some of those beliefs like we were talking about, was the square that said, if you love music, you should learn to DJ.
Yeah. And
I think that for me, that really resonated a lot. And I think that, the act of DJing, I think you expanded on this in some of the squares that you sent me, is like essentially curating, first and foremost, your own personal collection of music, making playlists just for yourself. And then that could expand to making playlists for others, maybe doing it in public. But at the end of the day, it's about kind of that act of curating and selecting. And it was interesting kind of reading some of the comments under those posts on Instagram, where people started to like dissect whether or not it's like cooking, or whether or not making the actual track is more like cooking. And I'm curious, like, what do you think was it about that square that sort of, I don't know, just caught people's attention and created this discussion?
I think it's just got a lot of emotive words in it. So it's like, if you love music, so there's like love, then it's like you should learn. So there's like a learning component, like there's an action. And then like DJ, people have a very inbuilt thing of what they think that thing is. And it hasn't really changed that much in the time that people have known what to be. You know what I mean? So if you say, oh Larry Levan or something, DJing is basically the same thing. Hasn't changed one bit, irrespective of the technology, irrespective of the time. That's it. Play music in the club. That's it. And I'm like, well, nothing else in the world functions like this. You know, production has changed. Writing has changed. Like filmmaking has changed. The camera in every pocket has changed the world. Why is DJing getting this pass as like something that is like, you know, immutable, like it could not change? This makes no sense. And we actually, it has actively changed. We can see it. Like people have got controllers at home. People have got these like whatever, the programs on a laptop, and it's like DJing's all around us in some form. You go into a coffee shop, you hear playlists, you hear people running their own mixes out of or Mixcloud or sitting in their car. Like it's everywhere. And just say maybe it's different to the way we're still defining it, still challenges people, because a lot of people that came in, especially if they started a long time ago, it wasn't just collecting and creating music for themselves. It was also like their weekend job or their bar gig or something like that. And that, for a lot of people, that's been competed away. So that, you know, if they were only making $50 or $100 or $300, wherever it is, that has now either gone to another generation, same money, maybe more. But for most people, the actual infrastructure of all of those things has disappeared. The record shop has gone, the local bar is closed, and now they feel protective over what DJing was in a way that is very emotional. And then how I've tried to, you know, approach all these ideas is like, what can give us like 1,000 answers rather than this is what it is, you know? And I don't mind people disagreeing and having a different point of view, but I'm like, okay, does this point of view make you make better art? Does this point of view make you more happy? Does this point of view, you know, help like the music that you already have sound better? Does this point of view make the people that you live with happy? Like, what is that actual point of view serving, even if it is not, you know, this idea of the truth? You know what I'm saying? This is art and not maths. And I keep on reiterating this point because I'm like, where did you get this definition from? I'm trying to think even where that would even come from. Like, most people haven't read books about DJing. You just conjured this thing up in your head by yourself, which is fine, but as long as it makes you happy.
I feel like, you know, I don't know if you've seen on like Twitter or social media, all these people talking about these prompt engineering for ChatGPT. Like, here's the best questions you can ask to get the best answers out of ChatGPT. I feel like you're doing the inverse of that, where you're like trying to come up with the best questions to ask people to get them to actually think like a little bit more deeply.
Yeah. And think about it, like a lot of artists are asking why they can't build audiences or why they don't have maybe some sort of global reach. I'm like, well, if your answer is the same as 1,000 people in the comments, then that shows you that there is some sort of connectivity, but then that isn't generally what, you know, raises an artist above the others. You know what I'm saying? And it's usually, okay, they have the connectivity, but then they have a really, you know, the 5% difference or 10% different point of view on something. They dial up to the extreme, and then that's what makes them break out and stand out. And the commodification of, you know, learning how to DJ, for example, this square is, you should learn how to DJ, not someone else should teach you how to DJ. And I made that point deliberately because, again, it's like handing over someone else's point of view on something. And you say, well, why didn't, you know, if you went to culinary school, isn't that learning to be a chef? Sure. But there's something different in being self-taught and self-exploring. I wouldn't say one is like better than other, but with this way I'm pushing the idea, I think it makes it more interesting.
When you were learning, was it kind of mostly self-taught? Were you kind of...
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't really a way to learn. Like, I don't even know how I would have learned at that time unless someone was sitting on my shoulder and like, this is how you do it. Yeah, beyond the basics of like beat matching and stuff, you're finding your own way. And in the genre that I was DJing, it was new still. So there wasn't like some defined way of playing grime. Like, yeah, I guess you could say it was what Slimzy and Logan Samo and Spyro were doing. Sure, but even them, there are 3 different styles of DJing. There was all these paths open to like do something what I thought would be different and interesting. And, you know, this idea of pushing the music forward. So it didn't even make sense to copy what they were doing anyway, because they were already doing it. Yeah, so that you should learn how to DJ. This is why I've tried to also like not inject maybe my like, opinion on things, because I'm like, okay, let's see what happens if DJing goes this way or that way or that way. And that'll be worth, like, it's just worth seeing where things land, rather than imparting your like point of view and going, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And that's what I tend to see out of electronic music culture. There's this like protectionism over things that haven't got any built-in rules, which feels like it's very confusing. Someone coming in, if you try to say, well, you can't do this, it's like, well, where's the actual rules here? There's no grime Bible, there's no drum and bass Bible. As far as I know, there's no house music Bible. So what are we doing here?
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I feel like you could think of what you're doing with the L Squares project as sort of DJing with ideas, in the sense that you're kind of curating, picking, and introducing these ideas to people on your Instagram. Sometimes you kind of put in various ones together and kind of put in like, you know, a series of them in a reel. And I think that encouraging people to like expand their ideas of and conceptions of what something is, I think is, you know, something that we all need reminding of in this day and age. You know, I think people get stuck in this dogmatic sort of view of like, this is how it's done and this is the only way that it can be done.
Exactly. You know, like when you read artist interviews and say like if it's by a house artist, and then the natural thing is for them to say, oh, I'm influenced by, I don't know, Theo Parrish or Moody Man or whatever was big in house at that time, or whoever is, you know, someone that they kind of respect in that field. Whereas if a house artist said, you know, these are the things that influence me right now, it'd be listening to Mick Lynch talk, Street Fighter 2, the ending of WrestleMania 40, the last episode of EastEnders. People be like, what? But actually, that must be playing in. Like, why exclude that from your influences? Because those are things you're still taking in, right? And I think like directly going, hey, I'm referencing these things, as opposed to just going, well, I'm listening to this other song and then making a song out of this other song. Most people are not actually functioning that way. It feels like the right thing to say, but I'd imagine that, all right, loads of people probably do it that way, but there's all these other inputs that are probably unconscious that are kind of filtering into your ideas. So me just amplifying them feels maybe bizarre to people, but I'm like, well, I'm also consuming that content too, maybe in higher volume, you know?
Yeah, I remember in one of the talks you were talking about how your YouTube homepage is kind of like a crazy collection of like a bunch of different things, like SpaceX videos and things like that. Is there anything that for you right now is kind of like inspiring you in terms of the L Squared project or more broadly in general?
Yeah, like, I mean, you said like DJing with ideas. I think that I've used that analogy before. Like I've drawn the CDJ, the mixer, and then the notepad as like one unit. And like that feels like what I'm doing, like oscillating between the two things. And like even using the lecture format, like a DJ set, kind of, okay, well, there's not a lot of people talking about music in that way. There's not even a lot of people talking about music, like the actual music, you know, what is coming out the speakers. That's another challenge. But I guess music and idea at the same time, people are not doing as much. Again, it just gives me like a bit of a untrodden path to go down. And it's a path that I guess very few people could like give you like advice on. It's like, well, what are you trying to do here? You're trying to make like music out of do you know what I mean? It's a bit more abstract for people, and I think it keeps it interesting for me.
Yeah, totally. I'm curious in terms of like, you know, questioning the status quo and kind of rethinking concept, like on the topic of record labels. Obviously, you know, over a decade ago, you started Butterz with Skilliam. I think you've also put out some of the music around the Yellow Squares project on a new label. And I'm just curious, when you think about where we're at now in 2025, got all these social media platforms, it's kind of easier than ever to actually, create a label out of thin air very quickly. I'm just curious, like, what does the concept of a label in your mind even mean in 2025? Like, what does it represent?
Yeah, again, I feel like this thing can have 1,000 answers. So, like, before a record label, like the record label that I started was literally a record label. We made records that had the Butterz label on it, and it was like unifying a bunch of producers doing the same thing or do it in the same area at the same time, in and around like a sound, an organization of a small group of people. Whereas like today, if I was starting a label from scratch or, that kind of similar idea, that would go across like music and art and like, I guess other things I'm interested in. So it'll be like binding ideas and people, maybe in space and time under one banner. Does that make sense? So maybe instead of having, if you counted like how we used to rate record labels was like their discography or like what their releases were, but actually like if I was starting something now, you would rate the label maybe by it's like activations or it's like releases in a broader sense. So it'll be like, okay, the record was good, then the like 360 installation was awesome, and then the lecture was cool, and then the stems that they released are great. Whereas it wouldn't be, single EP album. I think that's not that important. Or because we've got more formats to work with, we can stretch ideas like a lot longer maybe than we've used to, and maybe use different disciplines to get across the same points. In terms of like creating a music record label for, I guess, a complete DIY situation is really difficult to, even though the tools to like reach audiences is the possibility of reaching more people is higher. There are more people doing the same thing or trying to reach people with attention. So you're trying to compete in the same space as, news, politics, drama, other forms of entertainment too. Whereas I guess before, when I started Butterz, it was in spaces where people went there for that music. Whereas now, if you're trying to reach people via socials, it's so difficult. So I don't know. Today, I thought about like how I would start something new and what it would require. And I think it has to be like a combination of like interesting cross-section of talent, a space that you share, like a studio, whatever that is, and then a kind of income for the idea or company that is independent from, just the sale of the art. So this is why you probably see a lot of people creating agencies and collectives more than record labels now. Does this make sense?
Yeah, totally. I interviewed a guy named David Zhao, who was actually a former colleague of mine at Mixcloud and has gone on to set up a record label called Eastern Margins. So they kind of curate and, put the spotlight on a lot of music from across Asia and Southeast Asia. And it's interesting. I was talking to him about kind of what is involved in his label, and it is part traditional kind of record label putting out tracks, albums, EPs, but it's also part management agency and part just kind of general agency, and they'll kind of do, different types of projects with brands or with other artists and things like that. And I think that you just kind of have to be more versatile maybe today in this day and age where like you were saying, like in a way, everybody is competing for that attention, and the kind of platforms and means to compete for it are broader and more general, and often I think include like a visual element.
100%. For that kind of brand, like for Eastern Margins or for Butterz or Dialed In or whatever it's going to be, it's like what would make maybe like a group of people want to work together, and then that being quite solid. It's not like you can't just do that via contracts. Like contracts are not solid enough today to to justify, you know, unifying under a name brand. So there has, for them, I feel like there's, you know, there's this idea of identity and, you know, bringing together a particular sound and a particular scene or whatever it is, or doing things in a particular time and place. It's not just like, oh, we've taken a record from here, we think it's good, and we're putting it out. I think that kind of way of working can, you know, maybe like the big independents can still do to an extent, because they are living off catalog effectively. You know, their businesses function off the sale of their old records and publishing. Whereas for a DIY outfit, you have to like scrap for every bit of money you can get to make it work. Unless you want to be like, you know, the other way of doing a label today is just being like, you know, effectively just, you know, setting money on fire. Like, and I think this is like I feel like if I was going to do it again, that'd be kind of cool, just to be like, okay, I think this artist is good, I'll work with them, I'll just fund their idea and expect nothing in return, and like more like on a patronage type of level. And then, you know, I guess I would learn from them in terms of the way they produce and put out the idea into the world. And then on my side, I can be like, okay, I can use that learning to feed back into other projects for myself or for others. I feel like there is some sort of value exchange to be had there. So for example, if I don't know, worked with David or like another artist, and I gave them whatever 10 grand or 20 grand to do a project, and you got the inner workings of how they think about putting out work. I just saw what happened. Yeah, I don't know. That could be kind of interesting.
You're making me think of there was a British act. I think it was dance music. I think in the late 80s, early 90s, who got a £1 million contract, and then they literally set it on fire. I think it might have been KMF or somebody like that. Yes. I can't even remember their name.
Was that even a real story? Was that those fake rappers, right? From it was like, I think there was like some rappers from Wales or something. There was some story like this. Yeah, I don't remember the story exactly, but but it was supposed to be a publicity stunt.
Maybe, yeah, exactly. Maybe it was fake news back before we even had a term for that. But no, the other thing you were making me think about is like there are some record labels, I feel like, who have managed to evolve and kind of like keep up with the times, in the sense that, like, I'm thinking of like labels like XL, who I know specifically they will like pick and choose artists who also have a strong visual identity, you know. So I think they signed like MIA back in the day, even the White Stripes. I think they did one of Dizzy Rascal's albums. And I think all of these artists had something about them that was kind of like different. And it was not just the music, but there was a visual side to it as well.
Sure. Okay, this is a good example. This is I've got you into a hole here, or you've got yourself into one. You said labels like XL. Okay, how many are like XL? So when I started the Butterz, like I guess the blueprint for me, or what was right in front of me, was like hyperdub and tempo. So it was like, okay, these are similar enough things, like a small enough scale to be like, okay, cool, we can be like the ends version of hyperdub, or like the grime version of tempo. Like tempo is a dubstep label that was run by the Rinse team. So I was like, okay, we just that was the kind of business logic. Okay, like they seem to be selling a lot of records, we can probably do the same BPM, different people. There's an audience for this. I think like when you get to think of those artists that you mentioned, effectively that business was a different business. Like the record selling business is not the same as like what we have now. And unless you are selling, you know, I've seen this week Sam Fender selling 100,000 records in 1 week, and this is so rare now. This happens maybe like once every 2 years, whereas before that was the business. Whereas today, even the most interesting, like, you know, critically acclaimed people that won Mobos, some of them have sold less music than I've sold books, and my book's been out 4 weeks, which is scary. You know, it's kind of scary how low the actual sales are today. So it's really hard. It's a lot harder to build a business out of selling the core product now. So that's why I say, well, okay, if I make money doing something else and then I choose to like spend it on releasing artist work, then there's not a conflict of interest. Whereas if I was trying to take whatever MC off the street and then make them a star, the cost and likeliness of success is so low that if I just put that aside and mark it as an L straight away, then I would probably be at peace with it. The harder bit is when you're actually trying to claw back money and make it work. I don't know. There might be some sort of reverse psychology in that, where because you've already committed the finance or the energy to it, you're like, okay, cool, doesn't matter what happens. Whereas I think there's like decisions that you would take very differently if you're trying to make a profit, and that is actually a more restrictive way of working. And I can see like sometimes when people are trying to give me or giving me feedback about the way I do have maybe monetize this project, they're saying, oh, well, you can do coaching, you can sell a course, you can do this. I'm like, well, that would make me miserable. Why the hell would I want to do that? But it's because they're thinking of like maximizing shareholder value. But the only shareholder in this operation is me. So it doesn't matter.
Do you feel like, changing lanes a little bit, the radio side of things has changed a lot in the last kind of like 10, 15 years? Because I think, you know, if you think about the days of pirate radio kind of evolving, you know, today we have, I know you've spoken a lot about One Extra, Capital FM, and places like that, especially in the UK. And it feels like they are also trying to play this game in a way kind of everybody is trying to play in terms of the attention economy. And a lot of what they're playing, a lot of these kind of more commercial radio stations, and you've highlighted the fact that a lot of what they're playing is not actually homegrown Black British music, but it's actually recycled American rap from 20 years ago or something like this. And I was listening to your talk that you were giving at the Mobile Awards conference, and you were actually running through some of the like top 40 artists and the kind of lineups for Wireless Festival and things like that. And I was curious if you think that is kind of a byproduct of this attention economy, where they're trying to get people's attention, and the only way they know how to do it is through what worked 20 years ago.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I think there's a few things happening all at once. So the BBC is like following the metrics and the logic of streaming. So streaming is designed to keep your attention, and the BBC shouldn't be running off the keep your attention type of logic. It should be like to produce, you know, high quality output, representing the voices of the nation. If you thought, okay, well, Spotify is in the maximize shareholder value, what should be the BBC be? It should be nearly like the opposite. And when it follows market logic, but is not actually in the market, or is not a commercial organization, then it drags everything down with it. So you have a situation now where their Black music station, One Extra, is copying the commercial Extra station, the Capital Extra, and they kind of there's really similar music in between both of them, and they will compete to zero. So gradually, less and less people are listening to radio in general, less and less people are listening to the BBC. So there's only one end game for that strategy. If the end game strategy is zero, irrespective of what they play, why not play homegrown? If it's zero playing Joe Budden, what's the point? You know, this is the question I ask, and the reason why I ask it publicly is because I wonder why no one else says it. We've got a whole business of people trying to sell music, and the platform that we should be not reliant on, but it should be there to support us, actively does not support us. Last week I did that mobile conference. The next day was the Mobile Awards. Bashi won 2 awards. One of those awards was supported by One Extra. And the next day they didn't play his song once in daytime. So that tells you like the strategy of what they're saying they're doing versus what they're doing is a completely wayward. And yeah, as you know, listeners and attention has been more divided, and listening habits become more divided. To claw that back is going to get even harder. So I don't know, you know, again, if I'm looking at 2029 as some sort of line in the sand with all of this kind of stuff, will One Extra still exist then? I don't know. And if it exists, will it exist still playing the same things it plays today or was playing 2 years ago or 3 years ago? If so, it'll be just a shame. It's like a waste of resources. And the people that work there, they don't want to do that either. So there's something in the policy that is incentivizing a whole bunch of people to do something that they think is wrong and they think is bad for music, for culture, for the industry, for the country. That's messed up, man. Like it's the real like if you filter this out of like how that behavior becomes normalized, you go to a coffee shop, you hear the same music. You go to a festival, they book those artists. 50 Cent is headlining Parklife this year. What are we doing? You know, what this is crazy. And it's not like I'm saying the music is bad, but 50 Cent is headlining, performing the album from 22 years ago. It's not he's fifth headlining because he's got the latest song out that everyone likes. He's performing the songs from the radio that are on every day. It's not good.
Especially when there's like so many incredible artists in the UK. Like, you know, Little Sims, I would hold up any day was a better MC than 50 Cent. But what was interesting reading the comments below that video you shared from the Mobile Awards conference, a lot of people, and I don't know how true this is, a lot of people were saying that the DJs actually don't even have a choice. Like they're being mandated to play this popular hip hop music from 20 years ago, and they don't even have a choice. I don't know if you've spoken to people there. Like, do you know if that's the case?
Yeah, they have a playlist and they play what they're told to play. Like for the most part, they get some choices of what they can play, but not a lot. Otherwise, the music wouldn't all be the same all the time, every day. So, yeah, I doubt if you look at, you know, what plays on the old school show, I doubt this is their musical taste. It's just the same thing as, you know, what is played during the day. But this, yeah, the specialist shows they obviously get a say, but that's when a lot less people are listening. So and this is like all I'm saying is like this is not an attack on the presenters. It's an attack on what the idea of the thing is in the first place, and that goes to the top.
Or even the idea of like trying to compete in terms of like keeping people's attention with whatever. It's sort of like this aggregation of like mediocre popularity that kind of leads everybody into like the sameness.
Exactly. And people lock in for 40 minutes, so you could play the same songs every 40 minutes all day because no one spends longer than 40 minutes listening to the radio by their data measure. But then it's like, what does that end up producing? And what is the cultural output of that thing? And then it puts the presenters and the actual whole institution in a position where they actually have to lie. They have to lie about what they do and what they play to like maintain like some sort of cultural significance or relevance and retain funding ultimately. So we're in this weird scenario where I've never put out anything that anyone else can't see. All I do is post the track list. And, you know, some people go mad about it. You know, one of the presenters commented on my post, and I just think, well, I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying, why don't we just play our own music? Which probably make it better for our whole ecosystem.
Just asking a question, and if the question feels like it hurts or it's stinging, then maybe it's something that they know deep inside is pretty spot on. And I think, you know, maybe it's a question that needs to be asked.
Sure. And for the most part, like the BBC is not participating in the market. So they're not actually affected by market forces in the way that the rest of the world is. So the frustration of when I've had people maybe attack my point of view in public, I'm like, well, you come out into the real world and see how your ideas function in them. But they don't, because why would you? You've got the sweet spot of like playing music and job irrespective of whether you deliver results or you don't.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the original idea behind starting Mixcloud was that we were making these mixtapes, making radio shows, and also listening to a lot of those specialist shows that would only come on at like 2 a.m. in the morning or something like that. And of course, like, if you have to work the next day, it's kind of hard to stay up to 2 in the morning. So the idea was basically, can we have a place where people can like record their sets, record their shows, and put them up so that people can listen whenever they want? I guess ultimately, in a way, I hope that it's like a blossoming and has enabled way more than 1,000 people to create their own sort of pseudo kind of mini radio stations.
Exactly. And I think that's again the opposite of what's happening in the commercial world. So in the commercial world, it's gone down to 100 songs, for example, and then in the outside of that, it's endless. That you I guess it's like a job creating what you listen to in itself, like the new DJs, stations, everything. And it's kind of cool to have this moment where I meet young people, interesting young people. Some of them are just so well musically informed. I'm like, oh, right, how do you know about whatever Angolan techno? And they're like, oh, check this thing. Like, this is just wasn't in my kind of view of the world, or necessarily what I thought was important. Yes, curious, but like not something that I would go and seek out every day. And I guess the radio getting wider and wider and wider allows that to happen, and that's good. I don't think there's any downsides to that.
And I think it also, like, in a way, now that it's like the internet has made it global, is that you get really cool things. Like I know you've been out to Japan, and there's a grime scene in Japan, and I think did you go to Brazil as well? Is there a grime scene there too?
Yeah, and I think even the idea of grime changes when you change place, right? So the musical influences that are coming into Brazilian grime are Brazilian, so it's like Brazilian grime first, not grime Brazilian. And I think that's super interesting. And even if you just break out of all of these genres and scenes and forms, it's just like what people deem to be important in different places and the context where people listen to music being completely different, and that being shown is kind of interesting. So like I watch a lot of sets on YouTube, or on just, I'll see, I don't know if he's this journalist, Derek G, like he breaks down these different scenes and different things. I'm like, okay, cool. Like that's a layer that I wouldn't have had before with like Capitol or commercial radio, or even just buying records, like just blind. If some, back in the day, your window to the world was like, okay, Benji B played this, let me check this on this label, and then maybe you could read a piece on RA, and then that was it. Whereas now the rabbit hole is deep, And
yeah, you can go really deep if you want to go deep.
It's great.
Yeah,
I do love that about the world today.
Shout out to Derek G. He's actually a former Mixclouder as well. He's got an excellent podcast as well, so check that out. I'm curious about where you think things are going in the next, say, 4 to 5 years, like we talked about. Like, do you feel that there's this sort of bifurcation nearly where there's kind of like your popular hip-hop / pop kind of mainstream music that is going to be, your Spotify top 40 playlists and things like that, and then kind of this big blossoming of like the mid to long tail of everything else that's happening? Like, how do you think that music culture and consumption is going to change or be the same in the next kind of 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I feel like we've had that wave already of like the pop thing just continuing, and then like the huge independent artists. And I think the next wave is the actual pop thing, because of the infrastructure that supported independent artists collapsing on itself. Effectively, it's like pop being even like not bigger, but it's taking up more people's money. Like the Beyonce ticket is whatever £400, or the Drake ticket will be $250, or whatever the number is. So that $250 used to be 10 tickets for 10 different shows, whereas now it's one show, one stadium. You go to one concert, one festival, one club a year, That's it.
Like this consolidation of like
exactly for a lot of people. If you're lucky, I mean, most people like a lot of people wouldn't be able to afford that. But let's use that analogy. Like once a quarter, you do something music related, and I think on a smaller scale, like the independent artist or the formerly independent artist or the DIY artist goes down to like effectively like I'll split this in half. Let's say we go to the one man band or the one person operation who can make their stuff and handle the administration and deliver it more or less by themselves. They do a few shows here and there. They own all their music. They, they'll tour when appropriate, and they work with brands, and they'll do really well. Like think of like Derek G, but also having songs. So you have effectively your own little media operation that you can make from home. You make whatever you want to do. Kind of, Kenny Beats has done this, Alchemist, that kind of thing, but more artists kind of doing that. And then you have this other, I guess, 50% of people that work full-time or part-time or more of the time, and then they put out work when they feel like it's important to put out work, and they're visible, participating in the artistic community, winning awards or not winning awards or nominated for awards, but they also work. So like the most famous DJ or the most interesting DJ to follow might just be a nurse or a dentist, and then they don't need any money from the art practice, and then it enables this kind of level of kind of truth because they're not dependent on their art to make a living. And like the push and pull over the last 15-20 years has been like I'm not going to say anything because I've got this brand deal. I'm not going to say anything because this might hurt this relationship with this. I think hopefully there's this breakthrough of like, well, now I can say whatever I want because I've got a job.
Yeah.
And
or make whatever type of music actually speaks to me as a person, rather than I want to make something that I think might chart because I have to and because it's my only source of income.
Exactly. So, and if the door is truly shut on those places, like on Spotify playlists, on commercial radio, then it's like, does that make you try harder to get there, or does it make you go, you know what, I'm just going to disengage from this whole system? And I think more people will just go, you know what, I'll just disengage and go and make whatever weird stuff I like, or it could still be poppy, it still could be accessible, by just doing it on their own terms. But again, with the buffer of also having other kinds of work or other income that's not connected to their art practice. And then for artists, that's the rent is the
creative director, right?
Like it's a creative director, exactly. So if that is taken out of the equation, for a lot of artists or people that are interested to follow, then it's like, okay, what do you do what would you do if your rent was paid for like 3 years? And do you know
anybody who's like operating like that right now?
I know a few people, but some of them don't. I guess they don't overlap they don't say, I have a full-time job. They just present on the internet as their character or whatever. This is the professional wrestling angle, right? It's like they are just that thing, but they don't need to make money. Some of the time they do, some of the time they don't. And sometimes they actually spend more money. Most artists are like this. They spend more money than they actually make on their projects. So it kind of, they're doing something that their job allows them to do. And that being cool to follow. Like to us, the end consumer or the end user or the end enjoyer of the art, it doesn't matter if they make 100 grand or none. Not really. It's just like, is the work good?
Maybe in a way, like we kind of need to normalize a little bit more this idea that like somebody might be a nurse or dentist or whatever during their daytime, and they make sick beats at night and on the weekends, and that's cool. Like that's totally fine. I think it doesn't need to be something that people need to hide or anything like that.
For sure. And I guess the last layer of all of those things is that there are people that I think have like a one-way relationship with their like audience. So it'll be like, okay, I'm going to stand here and sing the songs to you or play the techno to you or whatever it's going to be. And then there's a kind of artist to artist relationship as there are more people participating in art. So the way we would measure someone's like actual influence wouldn't be sales. It would be like, what did that artist help other artists create? It's not like, do they have 1,000 true fans? Do they have like 1,000 artists creating in their like, you know, ecosystem or in their sphere of influence? Like, and that being like a more of a sign of like, okay, this artist or this label is is an idea set that's created more labels or more artists or more of this kind of way of thinking. And I think like a lot of the metrics of like how we used to think, oh, who is the biggest DJ in the world? It would be like tickets and festival performances. But in my world, the biggest DJ in the world, DJs in the street in Brixton.
AG?
Yeah. So this metric doesn't even connect anymore. It's like, okay, streaming live on TikTok for 3 hours, 3 times a week. He's clipping out all of these things, posting like 10 clips a day. He's DJing, you know, at community centers and old people's homes. That doesn't resemble like, you know, the, you know, release song, play at Park Life, play at Tomorrowland, play at, you know, whatever, EDC. But we're going to see, that's one version of that. And I think there's 1,000 ways this thing can get more interesting. And that's why I'm sticking around. Like, you know, I think that the harder thing is like, sometimes when I talk about these ideas, I sound like not kind of optimistic. I'm like, nah, I think it's going that way. And that feels more interesting to me than it staying the way it is today.
Sweet. Well, one last question for me before we wrap up. I'm curious if you were kind of talking to your younger self or, you know, 16, 17-year-old who's thinking about stepping into the music culture industry, so to speak, like what would you say is the best way that they can invest in themselves and in their future?
I think it's like not fearing learning anything. So everything I have done, I could have probably done 2-3 years before, but there was, I guess, a mindset of thinking, oh, like that's not, like that someone else does that, or like I can't learn that, or that's an accountant's job, or like all of these things that used to be separate jobs started to merge. I used to think a manager was a different person. I was like, oh, hold on, what is the job description of this kind of person? What do they do? I'm like, oh, I can do that, or I can learn how to do that, and that maybe the breakup of all of these things that used to look like completely different roles, or like things that felt unreachable to me, being like super curious and asking questions and not taking a job title as like an agent is not a priest, a manager is not a king, the CEO is not God. You know what I mean? No offense. Yeah.
No, it's true.
It's just people with ideas and doing stuff.
Yeah.
And you have ideas and you can do stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like having that curiosity and that openness to this sense that like if you're willing to be curious and learn about something, you could do anything, right? You could be your own manager, you could be your accountant. I mean, there may be some bits and pieces that you find like less interesting, that's okay too, but not assuming going in that you can't do it or can't learn about it.
Yeah, I'm like still going through this every day. This is not like if I told myself that at 16, that might have helped me like advance quicker as like, I don't know, like a DJ or producer or something. And then it would have been like, okay, you hit this other wall of life things or admin or something. And then you hit this other wall of like health, or you hit this other, I mean, it's just constantly like developing, relationship building, and like where you want to live. All these things that just keep on like mounting up as you get older, right? So it's not like I have not solved this. It's something that I'm constantly like, oh yeah, actually, I just need to maybe read that book or like go out and learn that thing.
Close the app, make the thing.
Exactly. So yeah, like I said, the message is for me.
On that note, well, first of all, thank you very much for joining. This has been a great philosophical conversation. I've really enjoyed it. But if people want to kind of go deeper and go down that rabbit hole and kind of learn more, where can they get the book? Where can they find you in social media?
Yeah, so my social media is just ELI and then 1 instead of a J. so ELI1AH. And then I guess on there you'll see everything. So where to get the book, the book's in stores like Amazon and all that kind of stuff. I have an album out with an MC called Jams, which is everywhere that you listen to music. And yeah, I'm out and about. So yeah, people that listen to this, like, or either DJ or lecturer in your town at some point in the future, hopefully.
Yeah, I know you've got Barcelona coming up. Any other dates kind of that you know of coming up?
There's loads, man.
Too many? Okay.
Not in like a negative way. It's like, it's good. I'm out and about.
Man about town. Yeah, I know you got a link tree linked on your Instagram, and I imagine other socials as well, where I found the book, ordered that, and all the links are in there. So check that out if you're listening and want to go deeper. And yeah, on that note, yeah, thank you once again for joining. Love this. Hopefully we can do it again someday.
All right, man. Respect. Thank you.